What did you find? Written inside the wedding ring that was never meant for you. I never planned on telling anyone about this ring. For a long time, I tried to convince myself it was just some odd fluke, a bizarre family trinket that fell into my hands by mistake. But I can't shake the feeling that it came to me for a reason. Maybe you'll call me naive for believing that an object could hold so much weight. But let me start from the beginning, because if I'm going to spill my guts about everything, I'd better do it properly, before I lose my nerve. I first discovered the ring on a late October evening. The day had a peculiar energy from the start. I'd just been downsized at work, some fancy term meaning you're no longer needed, so beat it, and I was clearing out my childhood home for a potential sale. My parents, Linda and Robert, had decided to move closer to my sister Sarah in Florida, and they left me in charge of cleaning out the attic in the old house in Pennsylvania. To be honest, I was glad for the distraction. My mind was a total mess, and rummaging through dusty boxes felt like a better way to spend a weekend than sitting around in my apartment, staring at the walls and thinking about my failures. The attic was dimly lit by a single naked bulb, which flickered sometimes for no reason. It smelled of mothballs and old paper, like so many neglected memories were floating in the air. I pulled out a few boxes stacked in the corner, expecting to find old Christmas decorations or decades worth of tax returns. Most of it was exactly that. Paperwork nobody cared about, any broken ornaments, a couple of ancient photo albums with pictures from family reunions. But then, near the bottom of one box, I felt something roll under my palm. It was a small black velvet pouch no bigger than my fist. I thought maybe it was a set of earrings or a watch. Imagine my surprise when I flipped the pouch open and out tumbled a single gold wedding band. The gold looked darker than I expected, not quite tarnished, but old in a way I could sense rather than see. I don't know why, but my pulse kicked up a notch. I picked it up and saw something scratched on the inside. At first, I couldn't read it. My eyes had to adjust to the faint attic light. Leaning close to the bulb, I peered at the inscription. To LR. Forever, my love. The engraving was delicate, in a beautiful script, like it had been done by a master jeweler. But the message was short and haunting. I'd never heard of an LR in my family, and definitely no one had that combination of initials. There was a feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I was trespassing on something deeply private, something I had no right to see. And yet, I felt glued to that ring, as though it wouldn't let me set it aside. I vaguely recalled my grandmother June, telling us about a few distant relatives with unusual stories. I couldn't remember if any of them had the initials LR. Could it have belonged to a great aunt or a cousin I'd never met? I was curious, but it also felt wrong, like prying into a diary that didn't belong to me. Still, I couldn't ignore how strongly this ring was tugging at me. I slipped it into my pocket, finished packing up the box, and climbed down from the attic. That night, I brought the ring to my apartment and left it on the kitchen table. It looked completely out of place next to my overdue bills and the half-empty bag of groceries I couldn't afford. I toyed with the idea of showing it to Mom or Dad, but they were already on their way to Florida. Besides, I vaguely remembered Mom telling me that if I found anything strange or old, I could either toss it or donate. It felt wrong to toss a wedding ring in the trash, especially one that looked so full of meaning. There was a sense of weight to it, literally and figurative. Instead, I did what any normal person would do. I took a few pictures of it and sent them to my best friend Michael, who lived 2 floors above me. Michael was the sort of friend who'd been in my life since high school, the guy who'd crashed on my couch a million times, the guy who always had a calm perspective when I was spinning out. I texted him, "Dude, found this ring in my parents' attic. Weird inscription inside. No idea whose it is. Could be valuable, though." Michael, ever the practical one, wrote back, "Bring it up. Let's see if it's real gold. I've got that acid test kit from my jewelry phase." Yeah, Michael had a weird phase last year when he bought a bunch of random jewelry off eBay and tested its authenticity. Don't ask why. I was too curious, so I headed upstairs. 10 minutes later, we were perched at his kitchen counter, the ring resting on a paper towel. He carefully placed a small drop of testing solution on it. Sure enough, it reacted the way genuine gold would. 14 karat, if I'm not mistaken, Michael said. Decent piece, Ethan. But the inscription's interesting. Who's LR? I shrugged. No clue? Might be some old relative or family friend. Or maybe it's not even ours. It could have ended up in that attic by mistake. My parents' place is ancient. People have rented it in the past, stored boxes there. God knows. Michael held the ring up to the light. It's definitely got some years on. Could be from the 50s or 60s, maybe older. We looked at each other. You thinking of keeping it? He asked. I feel weird about it, I admitted. It's not mine. It's not meant for me. But I can't just toss it. There's something about it, like it's connected to something bigger. It's like it wants me to find out what the story is. Michael shot me a quizzical glance. You're not going to get all paranormal on me, are you? I laughed, but it was forced. Nah, not paranormal. Just curious. It's probably just a romantic relic from some relative I never met. Except, that night, I had my first dream about the ring. I was in a church, a small, old church that smelled of incense and dust. I was standing alone at the front, holding the ring in my hand, waiting for someone to walk down the aisle. But no one came. The pews were empty except for one figure at the back. I couldn't see who it was, just that they were staring at me. I woke up drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around me. My heart was racing like I'd run a marathon. And as I lay there, I found myself whispering, LR, as though it were the name of a ghost. The following day, I texted Mom to see if she had any clue about the ring. Her response was short and weirdly dismissive. No idea, honey. Just throw it out if it's not important. That was Mom for you. Never one for sentimental attachments, especially after the big. Dad was more of a memory keep, but he and Mom were on a road trip to. He rarely checked his phone. I decided I'd have to wait until they were settled in before I could grill them properly. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about the ring. I worked up the nerve to slip it onto my finger, just for a moment. It felt unsettlingly perfect, as though it had been sized for me. That was impossible, of course. I'd never been married, never even bought a ring for myself. But there it was, fitting snug. I panicked, pulled it off, and shoved it back in its pouch. My hand was trembling after. I spent a few days methodically going through old family documents I'd stashed away after clearing the attic. I found birth certificates, marriage certificates, my grandparents from 1952, my great-uncles from 1970, a few funeral notices, nothing with the initials LR. I also found old black and white photographs of people I didn't recognize, friends of the family from decades ago, I assumed. None of them had any prominent initials or scribbled names that matched. During this process, I stumbled upon a dusty wedding photo of my grandparents, Robert Sr. and June. She wore a plain ring. My grandfather's ring was also plain. No inscriptions that I could make out from the picture. Another dead end. But one photo caught my attention. A group shot in front of a small country church. I recognized my grandmother on the far left, wearing a pale dress. Next to her stood a woman I'd never seen before, slender, with curly hair, wearing a modest floral dress. Her expression was haunted, as if something had just startled her. I flipped the photo over, expecting the usual scribble. Summer 1955, the ladies at the wedding. Instead, it just said, "We missed you, Elle." The writing was faint, but my heart jumped at that single letter. L. Could it stand for LR? Was that woman the person connected to this mysterious ring? It wasn't proof, just an odd hint. But I felt a surge of excitement. I scanned the entire box for more references, more pictures, but couldn't find anything else about her. Restless, I tried to call Dad, left him a voicemail. "Hey Dad, call me back when you can. I found a ring in the attic. Something about LR. If this means anything to you, please let me know. I'm going nuts here." A few days passed. No word from my parents. I started feeling like a detective in a half-baked mystery novel, scouring old newspapers online for possible clues. I typed in my grandparents' names, the Pennsylvania town where we lived, the words wedding ring, LR, even love inscription. Nothing relevant popped up, just random news stories from the local area. I wondered if maybe the ring belonged to a family friend or an old neighbor. As I dug deeper, I discovered a local message board for genealogical research. People would post about missing relatives or strange family heirlooms. I decided to take a leap of faith. I posted, "Found a gold wedding ring from possibly the mid-1900s with an inscription. To LR. Forever, my love." The ring was discovered in an attic in northern Pennsylvania. Anyone have info or suggestions on how to identify this LR? I didn't really expect a response. It was more like throwing a message in a bottle. To my surprise, I received a private message the next morning from a user named Bygone Brides. She wrote, "That's interesting. I've been researching old wedding traditions. Could you send me a photo of the ring and the inscription? Also, do you have any old family photos from that time period you can share?" Something about her message was both intriguing and slightly unsettling. It felt too enthusiastic, like she was waiting for someone to mention LR. But I was desperate for clues, so I sent a couple of pictures and thanked her for her help. 3 days went by before she replied. Meanwhile, I started having more dreams about that dark church, about an invisible bride who never arrived. The sense of dread was escalating. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I heard footsteps outside my bedroom door. But each time I'd check the hallway, nothing. Still, the feeling lingered. Finally, an email landed in my inbox from Bygone Brides. She said she recognized the style of the engraving. It was typical of a local jeweler named Green & Sons, who operated in the 1940s and 1950s in a small town called Willows Creek, about 20 miles from where I grew up. She even attached a scanned newspaper advertisement from 1954 showing a sample ring with the same swirling script. My pulse sped up. So it was likely from that era. LR. Might have been from the 1940s or 50s. That meant the story behind this ring was older than I'd guessed. That evening, Michael came over with some takeout. I was hunched over my laptop, reading everything I could about Willows Creek, half ignoring him as he tried to talk about a new job opportunity he'd found. When he realized I was tuned out, he said, "Dude, you're freaking me out. Ever since you found that ring, you've been possessed. Maybe it's time to let it go." "Let it go where?" I snapped. "It's not like a random t-shirt I can toss in a donation box. This ring belonged to someone. It has a story. I feel like it's important, Michael." He sighed but nodded. "Then let me help you. How about we drive over to Willows Creek on the weekend? See if there are any old record offices or libraries that can help?" His offer struck me as ridiculously helpful. The kind of thing you see in a movie where the best friend volunteers to accompany the hero on a quest. Yet I was grateful. We decided to make the short trip that Saturday. When Saturday came, the weather was gloomy, a fine drizzle that blurred the windshield. Willows Creek turned out to be a sleepy little place with a single main street. We parked near an old-fashioned diner and ventured to the local historical society, which was housed in a converted Victorian home. Inside, the caretaker was an elderly man named Harold, who sat behind a desk strewn with piles of folders. He greeted us warmly and asked what brought us in. I felt a bit silly explaining about the ring, but Harold's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Let me think," he said, stroking his beard. "Green and Sons? Yes, I recall something about that. They closed decades ago, but some of their records might be in the local archives. Follow me." He led us to a dusty back room lined with filing cabinets. The musty smell of old paper was overwhelming. We spent hours combing through receipts, ledgers, and logbooks. Many were barely legible. But near the end of the third hour, Michael called me over. He'd found a ledger marked 1953 to 1955, with columns listing customers, types of rings, and brief notes. Michael pointed to an entry dated June 1955, commissioned, 114-karat gold band with inscription to LR. Forever, my love. Purchaser, E. Reed. My breath caught. E. Reed, I said out loud. Not LR. This was someone else, presumably the person who bought the ring for LR. So the ring was purchased by E. Reed for LR. This might be the lead we need. Harold jotted down a note. The Reed family. I recall there was an Everett Reed who owned a small farm on the outskirts of Willows. Could be him. That farm was sold in the late 50s, I believe. A swirl of excitement and dread bubbled inside me. We thanked Harold and decided to see if we could locate anything else in the local newspaper archives. The caretaker directed us to the tiny library across the street, which kept microfilm reels of old newspapers. There, the librarian let us rummage through the 1955 and 1956 editions of the Willows Creek Gazette. Eventually, we stumbled upon a mention of an Everett Reed in the Local Happenings section. June 20th, 1955. Congratulations to Everett Reed on his upcoming marriage to the lovely Lucy Rowe, scheduled to take place at St. Margaret's Church on June 30th. We wish the happy couple a bright future. Lucy Rowe, L.R. My mind whirled. So, the ring was meant for Lucy Rowe from Everett Reed. I traced my fingertip over the names on the screen. So they were supposed to marry on June 30th, 1955. That's about a week or two after the ring purchase. I glanced at Michael. We're getting somewhere. We kept scrolling through the papers, searching for the wedding announcement or photos. Finally, in the July 1st edition, we found a short, somber note. Tragedy struck when a sudden storm caused extensive damage to local properties, including the Reed farm. The wedding of Mr. Everett Reed and Miss Lucy Rowe has been postponed until further notice. No injuries reported, but the couple's home sustained substantial damage. We wish them a swift recovery and look forward to future nuptials. We read on, expecting to find another date for the wedding. But there was nothing. July passed, August, September. No mention of Everett and Lucy. Then, on October 10th, a small obituary notice appeared for Lucy Rowe. My blood ran cold. It read, Lucy Rowe, 22, passed away unexpectedly on October 8, 1955, in Willows Creek. Service to be held at St. Margaret's Church. She is survived by her mother, Bernice Rowe, and younger brother, Nathan. Friends of the family are welcome to attend. No cause of death was listed. It was just a few lines. No wedding, no mention of fiancé. No ring. Nothing. I felt sick. I couldn't imagine what could have happened. A sudden illness? An accident? Michael put a hand on my shoulder. Hey, Ethan, you okay? He could see how shaken I was. It's strange how the fate of someone I'd never met could hit me so hard. Maybe because I felt like I was prying into Lucy's tragic story, or maybe because I'd grown attached to the ring that she never got to wear. I need to know more, I managed. Why did this ring end up in my parents' attic? My grandparents lived 20 miles away from here. Is there a link between them and Lucy Rowe? After expressing our condolences at the library, like Lucy was still there to be, we left. Outside, the drizzle had turned into a cold rain. We made a pact to dig deeper. Over the next week, I repeatedly tried calling my dad, wanting to pelt him with questions about Lucy Rowe or the Reed family. Still no answer. Just occasional texts from Mom. We're busy settling in. Your dad's out buying supplies. They seemed oblivious to my growing obsession. On a whim, I spoke to my grandmother June on the phone. She was in an assisted living facility in Ohio. She was mentally sharp for her age, but her hearing wasn't great. I asked if she ever knew a Lucy Rowe or an Everett. There was a long pause before she answered in a soft, trembling voice. Lucy Rowe. I recall that name. It was so long ago, dear. She was a friend of a friend. I believe something terrible happened. Our families weren't close, but there was some scandal, perhaps. My pulse quickened. A scandal? Can you tell me anything more? Grandma June sighed. I was only about 20 myself at the time. There was talk around town that Lucy ran away, or maybe planned to, on her wedding, but I never got the full story. The next thing I heard, she'd passed away. It was a real hush-hush subject. People whispered all sorts of rumors, especially since her fiancé was, well, let's just say the Reed family wasn't well liked by everyone. I bit my lip. Did you ever meet Lucy in person? Only once, I think. She was quiet, had sad eyes, as if she was carrying some secret. I remember she wore a charm bracelet with a single silver heart. Oh, you know who might know more? My sister, your great-aunt Dorothy. She used to live in that area. But we lost touch. Don't even know if she's still around. I'm sorry, dear. I thanked her and hung up, my mind spinning. If Lucy was never properly married, if she died young, how did the ring vanish from Willows Creek and end up in our attic? Another piece of the puzzle was missing. My gut told me there was a hidden link. Some reason my grandparents had it. Maybe they tried to help Lucy. Maybe Lucy gave it to them. But who would confirm that now? That night, the nightmares escalated. I dreamed I was standing outside a farmhouse in the midst of a raging storm. Lightning illuminated the sky, and in each flash I could see a figure kneeling on the ground, crying. The figure wore a wedding dress that was soaked through. Mud splattered up the hem. She was clutching the gold ring in her hand, but as I stepped closer, the ring disappeared, and she glared at me like I was an intruder. I woke with a gasp, my chest heaving, and I swear I heard footsteps retreating down the hallway. In the morning, exhausted and jumpy, I decided to make one more trip to Willows Creek. Michael was working, so I drove alone. I wanted to see that old farmhouse if it still stood. A few hours later, I located the address from an old phone directory mention of Reed Farm, which ironically turned out to be a boarded-up ruin at the edge of town, next to a field of weeds. I got out of the car and walked the perimeter. The walls were charred in places, maybe from that storm or a later accident. The windows were shattered. Inside, everything was a rotting shell. A sign read, "Private property, no trespassing." But I was past caring about signs. I crept inside, picking my way through debris, stepping over fallen beams. Everything felt saturated with heartbreak, though that might have been my imagination. My breath echoed in the cavernous space. Then I saw a flash of something metallic in a corner. My heart thudded, but it was just a twisted piece of old farm equipment. I exhaled sharply, half hoping I'd find some personal memento that would unravel everything. Instead, I found a collapsed trunk. When I forced it open, it was empty except for a water-stained family Bible with the name Rowe inside. Most of the pages were blackened but on the front page, I could barely read a scrawled note. Lucy, my darling daughter. My throat tightened. There was nothing else to do there, so I left. Outside, I walked around the overgrown field and discovered a small wooden cross set in the ground. The paint had faded, but you could still see scratched letters. LR. My eyes welled up with tears I couldn't fully understand. Who put this makeshift memorial here? Everett? Her family? The wind sighed through the tall weeds, and I felt an acute sadness, as if the land itself mourned Lucy. I crouched down, traced a finger over the letters on the cross. My jacket pocket felt heavier than ever, because I'd brought the ring with me. I wanted Lucy to know it existed, that someone cared. The air felt electric, almost suffocating. I placed the ring on the cross for a moment, my heart pounding. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I didn't know exactly what I was apologizing for. That I had the ring and she never wore it? That she died so young? That no one told her story? A gust of wind nearly knocked the ring off the cross. Startled, I snatched it back. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing across the field. A woman in a pale dress. But when I blinked, she was gone. My nerves were frayed. I ran to the car and drove away, tears slipping down my face even though I barely knew why. The next big break came about a week later, in the form of a phone call from an unknown number. I answered with a cautious hello, and a raspy female voice said, "Is this Ethan?" My blood froze. I had no idea who it was, but she sounded ancient or unwell. I confirmed it was me. Then she said, "I heard you were asking about Lucy Rowe." I sank onto the couch, 1,000 questions flooding my brain. Her name was Dorothy, my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt, basic. She lived in upstate New York now, had left Pennsylvania years ago. She told me she'd gotten my number from Grandma June, who mentioned my inquiries. Dorothy said she had a story to tell me if I was willing to listen. I was on the next train to upstate New York. Dorothy lived in a small retirement community. She met me in the common area, a frail woman in a lavender cardigan, her hair in a neat bun. But her pale eyes glittered with determination. We settled into a corner by a fireplace, and she took my hand. "I knew Lucy," she began. "We weren't best friends, but we had a mutual acquaintance. I was about your age when this all happened." I practically held my breath as she spoke in a low, careful tone. Lucy was engaged to Everett Reed, yes, but it wasn't a happy match. Her mother had pushed her into it, saying Everett was from a decent farming family, that he could support her. Lucy was a quiet girl, prone to daydreaming. And there were whispers she actually loved another, someone from out of town, from a higher social circle. But that was scandalous in those days. She was torn. Dorothy sighed, rubbing her temples. A week before the wedding, Lucy disappeared for 2 days. Some said she ran off with that other man, but she came back looking ill and shaken. Then came the storm that damaged the farm. The wedding was postponed. Lucy confided in me once, told me she didn't want to marry Everett, that she felt trapped. I tried to help her, but there was only so much I could do. She cried, said she was pregnant. She didn't say if it was Everett's child or someone else's. She seemed terrified. Not long after, she passed away. The obituary was vague, but I always suspected foul play. My mouth went dry. Foul play? Meaning someone killed her? Or forced her to? Dorothy's voice dropped. There was a rumor Lucy was given something to take care of her condition, if you understand me. There were no safe ways back then. She might have died from complications. But the official story was that she died of a sudden illness. No one questioned it publicly. People wanted to hush it up to avoid scandal. I felt a weight pressing on my chest. And what about Everett Reed? He was furious from what I heard, ashamed too. He vanished after her funeral. Some say he left town to start fresh. Others believe he was heartbroken. I don't really know, but Lucy's ring, the one he bought her, never made it onto her finger. The day of the original wedding, she was going to run away for good. Or that's what I was told. Maybe your grandparents knew about it. Maybe they offered her a place to hide. But everything ended tragically. I wiped a hand over my face, my eyes burning. So how did that ring wind up in my family's attic? Dorothy shook her head. I can only guess Lucy might have confided in someone. Your grandparents or your great-grandparents. Maybe they offered to return the ring to Everett or keep it safe. Or Lucy left it there the day she visited. The truth is lost to time. I do recall an argument between your grandfather and my father about that poor girl's ring, but that was after Lucy's funeral. They never spoke of it again. It was as if everyone wanted to pretend it never happened. Tears gathered at the corners of Dorothy's eyes. I still see Lucy's face sometimes. She was so sweet, so young. She deserved better. I felt hollow. I found the ring, Aunt Dorothy. I have it. It's inscribed, to LR. Forever, my love. She gave a rueful nod. And now you carry that burden. I'm sorry. Maybe you can find a way to give Lucy peace. Maybe you can bring the ring to her grave, or pass it to someone in the Rowe family if there's anyone left. She paused, then gently patted my hand. You seem like a good person, Ethan. Just be careful. Sometimes, unearthing old secrets can cause more harm than good. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The weight of Lucy's tragedy sat on my heart like a stone. Thank you for telling me, I managed at last. Before I left, Dorothy pressed a small slip of paper into my hand with an address in Ohio. Nathan Rowe, Lucy's younger brother, had children. This might be their last known address. You didn't get this from me? A faint smile tugged at her lips. I returned home in a daze, holding the ring more tightly than ever. There was no question in my mind now. Lucy's story was haunting. The least I could do was try to put her spirit at ease, if such a thing was possible. The next few days, I wrestled with the idea of reaching out to the Rowe family. I wasn't sure how they'd react. Some random guy calling about a tragedy from 1955. While I was still weighing my options, my dad finally called me back. His voice was cheerful, as though he had no idea what I'd been going through. I bombarded him with questions about Lucy Rowe, the ring, whether Grandpa Robert Sr. had known her. There was a long silence, then Dad sighed. Ethan, I'll be honest, I heard whispers about a ring that belonged to some unfortunate girl who died too soon, but your grandparents never gave me details. I only know they felt guilty about something that happened back then. Maybe they tried to help Lucy run away, or maybe they discovered she died before they could do anything. They kept that ring as a painful reminder. That answered part of it, but left me with more heart. Lucy had been so close to escape, so close to reclaiming her life, and it all ended so horribly. I told Dad I planned to try to contact her remaining family. He hesitated, then said, "Just be respectful. You don't know what kind of old wounds you might be reopening." 2 days later, I worked up the nerve to call the number associated with the address Dorothy gave me. An older woman named Martha answered. She was polite but wary. I explained who I was, how I'd found the ring meant for Lucy Rowe, how I'd learned Lucy was her grandmother's sister. There was a stunned silence. Then Martha said, "My family rarely speaks of Lucy. Grandma told me it was too painful. I only know she died young before her wedding." I felt the tension in Martha's voice. Carefully, I offered, "I have the ring. I'd be willing to send it to you or bring it in person, if you think your family would want it." Another pause. Finally, Martha said, "Give me a day or two. Let me talk to my mother, see if she wants that ring. It might be too painful, but I'll let you know." During those next few days, I was on edge. I'd come so far, uncovered so many secrets, and now the ring might finally go to Lucy's family. I wondered if that was the right thing to do, or if bringing it to her grave was more symbolic. Then, on a dreary afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Martha. We talked. My mother said Lucy deserves to rest in peace, but the ring belongs in the place where her heart was happiest. You said you found out where her fiancé used to live. Maybe that's where it should stay. Or you could bury it with her, I don't know. I swallowed. Do we know where Lucy is buried? Martha sighed. We believe she was buried near St. Margaret's in Willows Creek. There's a small cemetery behind the church. Her headstone is unmarked, or so the story goes. My mother was never able to find it. She tried once. After that, she gave up. The next weekend, I returned to Willows Creek, ring in my pocket. The sky was overcast, a breeze cutting through the air. At St. Margaret's, I found a modest cemetery that didn't look very large. Rows of tombstones stood at angles, some so worn that the inscriptions were impossible to read. I spent hours pacing between them, checking each stone. Some had last names I recognized from old newspaper clippings, but no sign of Lucy Rowe. Eventually, the gray sky turned dark, and I had to give up. A caretaker approached, an older woman with a kindly face who asked if I needed help. I told her I was looking for Lucy Rowe's grave. She frowned. That name rings a bell. Let me check our records. She disappeared into a small office. When she came back, her eyes were sad. I found a partial mention of a Lucy Rowe, but no official record of a headstone. It just says, interred in the Rowe family plot, unmarked. The Rowe family might have put a small wooden cross or something. But it's not documented in the church's official ledger. She didn't get a full funeral here, only a private service. I thanked her, feeling a twist of sorrow. I thought of that small wooden cross near the ruined farmhouse. Maybe that was the only memorial Lucy had. I wandered the cemetery a bit longer, the ring growing heavier in my pocket. If I couldn't find her grave, maybe I could place the ring near the church, as close as possible to where she was supposed to be married. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt incomplete, like I was missing the final piece. In a last-ditch effort, I asked the caretaker if there was any local mention of Lucy's mother, Bernice Rowe. She nodded. Bernice remarried and moved away the following year. She left Lucy's remains here, I think. Poor family. There was nothing more I could do. With a heavy heart, I drove back to the old Reed farm one last time. It was almost dusk. The air smelled like wet leaves. That lonely wooden cross still stood in the field, leaning slightly to one side. I knelt down and rested the ring at its base, my eyes filling with tears. "Lucy," I whispered, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm sorry you never got to decide your own fate. You were forced into a life you didn't want, then forced into death before you could find your happiness. This ring was never meant for me. It was always meant for you. I hope wherever you are, you can rest now." The wind picked up, rustling the tall grass around. For a moment, I swore I heard a soft sigh, like someone gently exhaling in relief. Then the ring slid off the slight incline of the cross and rolled toward my knee. Goosebumps broke out on my arms. It felt like a sign. Maybe Lucy's spirit couldn't accept the ring abandoned there. Maybe I was meant to hold on to it a little longer. My hand trembled as I picked it up. I ended up leaving Willows Creek with the ring still in my possession. On the drive home, an odd calm settled over. I'd done all I could. I'd learned Lucy's story, recognized her pain, tried to honor her memory. Maybe that was enough. Perhaps in time, I'd give the ring to the Rowe family if they wanted it, or bury it properly if Lucy's grave was ever located. For the moment, though, I felt a strange sense of closure. The nightmares subsided after that weekend. I still had the occasional dream about a church, but Lucy no longer appeared weeping. She was simply standing there in a shaft of light, gazing at me with something like gratitude or acceptance.